I moved into the house on a Tuesday. Early spring. The kind of crisp morning where the cold doesn't bite, just lingers in your lungs like a question. The neighborhood was perfect. Too perfect, maybe. Rows of identical two-story homes with slate-gray roofs and soft, neutral siding. Perfectly trimmed hedges. Lawns that looked painted on. I remember the real estate agent's smile as she handed me the keys, wide, bright, just a bit too fixed. "It's very peaceful here," she'd said, her voice low, as if afraid to wake something. She wasn't wrong. It was peaceful. Unnaturally so. I noticed it before I even unpacked. I was standing in the driveway, keys in hand, just listening. Or trying to. There were no birds. No dogs barking in the distance. No idle hum of traffic. No clatter of someone mowing the lawn. I couldn't even hear the breeze. I told myself it was just timing. A quiet moment. Maybe the place was far enough from the city to miss the usual noise pollution. Hell, maybe I was just tired. Still, even my own footsteps sounded wrong, muted, like they were falling into carpet even though the driveway was concrete. I paused, stomped once. The sound came back dull, swallowed up. Inside, the house smelled new. The floors were that synthetic wood laminate. Beige walls, cheap fixtures, IKEA furniture the previous owner had left behind. I wasn't expecting charm, I just needed a reset. A clean slate. After the last year. I needed somewhere I could breathe again. I remember standing in the empty living room and exhaling long and slow, trying to feel something like relief. Instead, I just heard the air rush out of me and vanish into nothing. Like the walls drank it in. No echo. Not even a hiss of air through the vents. That silence, it didn't feel calm. It felt like the air was holding its breath. I told myself I was imagining it. That I was on edge after the move. Change does that to people. You start noticing weird details and your brain spins them into something ominous. Still, that night, lying in bed, I kept straining my ears. Waiting for a car to pass. A dog to bark. The wind to knock a branch against the siding. Something. But the only thing I heard was the rhythmic thump of my own heart. And even that felt like it was getting quieter. I spent the next morning unpacking in a kind of trance. The silence had weight to it. It pressed on me, subtle but steady, like the pressure you feel underwater. I kept telling myself I was just adjusting. Moving is stressful. My ears were probably just sensitive to the quiet after years of city noise. But it was more than that. I started testing things, just to prove to myself I wasn't crazy. I turned on the kitchen faucet and listened to the rush of water. It sounded wrong, distant, like it was coming through a thick wall. I clapped my hands once. No echo. Just a dull slap, like clapping into a pillow. Then I dropped a fork on the tile. Normally, metal on ceramic would make that bright, sharp ping. But here? It made a muted tick, like it had landed on felt. I even tried turning up the TV, volume cranked way higher than I normally tolerate. The picture was fine. The sound, though? Soft. Thin. No matter how loud I said it, it came through as if someone had wrapped the speakers in cotton. The house wasn't soundproofed. The walls were thin enough that you could see the cheap construction behind them in certain corners. So where the hell was all the sound going? I stepped outside mid-afternoon. The sun was warm, the air clean. But the silence, that goddamn silence, followed me out like a shadow. I saw a woman across the street pruning her hedges. She wore gardening gloves and a straw hat. I waved. She saw me. Gave a small nod. No smile. "Hey," I called out. She didn't answer. Just went back to snipping her bushes, the clippers moving silently. I know she heard me. I know I should have heard her. I watched another neighbor roll out a trash bin. The wheels turned without squeaking. The lid clattered shut without a sound. There was no hum of insects. No breeze rustling leaves. The trees didn't even sway. It was like everything moved, but nothing spoke. That night, I tried calling a friend back in the city. We chatted for 20 minutes. I could hear him fine. His jokes, his laugh, even the honking traffic outside his apartment. It was like his world was alive, full of life and noise. I looked out my own window while he talked, staring into a street of motionless trees and soundless houses. "You sure this isn't just some really good insulation?" he asked, trying to keep it light. "Maybe," I lied. But I knew it wasn't. Because insulation didn't make the sky quiet. The days blurred together fast. That's how silence works, I think. It smooths over the edges of time. No markers, no little sounds to break up the hours. You start to forget whether a moment happened this morning or yesterday. You start to wonder if it happened at all. I began walking the neighborhood more, trying to shake the strange tension building inside me. The streets were always clean. The yards always trimmed. The houses all looked like they'd been stamped out of the same mold. And the people, they were there. I'd see them out now and then. A man jogging silently. A mother pushing a stroller, her lips pursed tight. A kid bouncing a basketball in his driveway. It hit the pavement over and over, but I couldn't hear it. Not even a thud. Every time I tried to talk to someone, I got the same response. A quick nod, a polite but tight-lipped smile, and then they moved on. If I pressed, if I actually said something, they'd freeze up a bit. Like they didn't know what to do with words. Like the sound of my voice bothered them. I started keeping a notebook. At first it was just to help keep track of things, when I unpacked this, when I met that neighbor. But it became more than that. It became a kind of sanity check. A record. Evidence that I was still here, still thinking, still hearing. One morning I wrote down. Heard my coffee machine hiss. Barely. Definitely made a sound, but it felt wrong. Quiet. Slow. Later that day. Dog barked 3 houses down. Or I thought it did. Maybe I imagined it. That was the problem. I didn't know anymore what was real and what was just my brain trying to fill the vacuum. When the world gives you no sound, your mind starts piping in its own. I went back to the real estate listing for the house. There had been no mention of this place being unusually quiet. No weird reviews or online rumors. Just generic praise. Safe, peaceful, family-friendly. A few too many of those fake-sounding bot comments, maybe. But nothing that screamed red flag. Still, I noticed something odd in the pictures. In every photo, the windows were closed. Curtains drawn tight. Even in shots of rooms clearly meant to show off the view. I didn't sleep well that night. My ears kept straining, trying to hear something, anything. But the silence wasn't just silence anymore. It had a shape. It had a presence. And it was starting to feel like it was watching me back. By the end of my first week, I'd stopped playing music. There was no point. I'd turn on a song, crank the volume, and it would come out thin and drained, like listening to a ghost hum through a wall. Even the lyrics felt garbled, like the words themselves were dissolving. Silence has a way of getting inside your head. It's not just that there's no sound. It's that it removes the memory of sound. You forget what footsteps are supposed to sound like on wood. You forget how dishes clink together. You forget the little things, rain tapping the window, the fridge humming, the sigh of your own breath when you stand too long alone. It felt like the world here was padded. Like someone had taken a thick quilt and wrapped the entire neighborhood in it. I started testing it again. Just stupid experiments to prove I wasn't losing it. I dropped a book from shoulder height. No thud. I slammed a cabinet. It made a dull, distant noise like I was doing it in another room. I even tried yelling once, just a short burst, a single sharp "Hey!" The sound hit my ears and died immediately. It was like screaming underwater. No echo. No carry. And afterward, it felt like the air itself tightened. Like something heard me. The worst part? I began to forget what my own voice sounded like. Every time I spoke out loud, it came out weird, flat, foreign, like someone else's mouth was forming the words. I called my friend again. The one from the city. I didn't realize until halfway through the conversation that I was clinging to his voice like a lifeline. His apartment noises, the sirens, the upstairs neighbor pacing, even the creak of his damn office chair, they all sounded so alive. So normal. He noticed something was off. "You sound weird," he said. "Like far away. Everything okay?" I wanted to tell him everything. About the silence. The muffled world. The way it was starting to pull at me. But the words caught in my throat. And deep down, I was scared. Scared that saying it out loud would make it more real. Scared that if I tried to explain it, the silence would know. That night, I dreamed I was walking through the neighborhood in the dark. No stars. Just street lamps glowing in absolute stillness. All the houses had their curtains drawn. But I knew people were watching. I could feel eyes behind every window. And in the dream, I opened my mouth to scream. But nothing came out. Not even air. I woke up from that dream choking. Not figuratively, actually choking. Gasping like I'd been underwater. I stumbled out of bed, hands on my knees, sucking in breath like a man surfacing from the deep. But the air didn't feel right. It was too still. Heavy. Tasteless. I opened every window in the house. No breeze came in. Not even a whisper. The curtains didn't move. The air outside was the same as inside, dead. I stood at my front door for a long time that morning, staring out at the street. Everything looked fine. Idyllic even. The sun was bright, the sky was cloudless. Someone had left a bicycle tipped on the lawn, perfectly still. Nothing moved. No sounds came. It was like the world had been paused mid-motion. Then I saw him. An older man, maybe in his 70s, walking along the sidewalk. Slow. Deliberate. He wore a beige jacket and walked with a cane that tapped against the pavement. Except I didn't hear it tap. I only saw the motion. And something about him felt different. He wasn't polished like the others. Not stiff. His clothes were a little rumpled, like they'd been lived in. His head turned slightly when he passed my house. Our eyes met. He gave me a long, lingering look. Not friendly, but not cold either. Appraising. He stopped walking. Just stood there, his cane resting in front of him. I hesitated, then stepped out onto the porch. "Hey," I said. "Nothing." "Sir? Do you live around here?" He squinted, tilted his head like he was trying to place a sound far off in the distance. Then, slowly, he raised a single finger to his lips. SHHHHH. It was the first time anyone had made a noise in front of me since I arrived. It chilled me more than silence ever had. I didn't move. Didn't speak. We just stared at each other for a moment more. Then he turned, took a few slow steps, and vanished around the corner without a glance back. I didn't follow. I don't know why. Fear, maybe? Or maybe it was something deeper, a part of me that didn't want to know what I might find if I chased that thread. That night I didn't dream. Or if I did, I didn't remember it. I just remember waking up at 3:17 a.m. exactly. Because the silence was gone. Not replaced by noise. Replaced by something worse. Nothing. No sound. No hum. No pulse in my ears. Not even the rhythm of my own heartbeat. Just this overwhelming sense of absence. Like the world had exhaled, and forgotten how to inhale again. I started walking the neighborhood at night. I don't know what I was looking for exactly. Maybe some sign that I wasn't losing my mind. Maybe just some proof that the silence wasn't permanent. That it hadn't won. Most of the houses were dark after 10. Curtains drawn tight. No TV flicker in the windows, no porch lights. Just street lamps casting pale cones of light onto the empty sidewalks, illuminating nothing. The silence was thicker at night. Not just a lack of sound, but an active presence. Like the air itself was listening. Then one night, something changed. It was just after midnight. I couldn't sleep. I hadn't slept well in days. I stepped outside with no plan, just barefoot on cold concrete, staring down the street. That's when I heard it. A whisper. Faint. Impossible. like wind moving through a voice box, half-formed. I froze. It came again, closer this time. Not a word, not even syllables. Just the suggestion of speech. Like someone trying to talk through gauze. Breath without shape. I turned toward the sound. Nothing there. Just hedges and identical houses. Then I saw something. Not a person. Not exactly. Just a movement. A quick, shifting shadow at the edge of a yard 2 houses down. It disappeared behind a fence, too fast for anyone that age, too jerky for a normal walk. I followed. The street felt wrong now, like it was turning inward on itself. The further I walked, the more I noticed houses without doorbells, lawns without insects, cars parked neatly in driveways, but all with foggy windows like they hadn't been driven in years. Then the whisper again. This time behind me. I spun. Nothing. No breeze. No echo. Just that awful, pressing quiet. I tried calling out, but the moment I opened my mouth, my voice evaporated. I felt the words leave, but they never made it to my ears. It was like the silence was swallowing them whole, mid-air. I ran. I didn't think. I just ran back to my house, slammed the door, locked it, and stood there, panting. Only, I couldn't hear myself panting. The only sound in the house was a low, faint hiss, like white noise leaking from the walls. Barely audible, but there. A whisper line. It faded after a few minutes. I sat in the living room until morning, lights on, eyes wide, waiting for a sound that never came back. The silence was growing again. But now I knew it wasn't empty. It was watching, and whispering just out of reach. The next day, I went looking for the old man. I hadn't seen him since that strange warning, the finger to the lips, the silent command. Something about the way he looked at me stuck in my brain like a splinter. He knew. He was the only person here who showed anything close to awareness. And I needed answers. I walked the streets with a purpose, trying not to look like I was searching. Most houses were buttoned up tight, curtains drawn, porches empty. At one point, I passed a woman watering her flowers. The hose was on, but there was no splash. No gurgle. Just the shimmer of water catching the sunlight in absolute silence. I asked her, "Do you know the man who walks with a cane? Older guy, beige coat?" She blinked slowly, gave a too small smile, and shook her head. Didn't say a word. Just turned back to her flowers, the hose spraying onto the dirt with no sound at all. It wasn't until I reached the edge of the neighborhood, the place where the pristine rows of homes met a sparse wooded border, that I found something different. A shed. It was tucked behind a row of overgrown shrubs, barely visible from the sidewalk. Not part of any house. Weathered wood, cracked window, rusted hinges. It looked completely out of place, too real, like it had belonged to something older, something that had been here before the neighborhood was built. I followed the thin dirt path to its door, heart hammering in my chest. Still no sound. I knocked. Nothing. I reached for the handle. It was cold, metal biting into my palm, and pulled. It creaked open. That made a sound. Barely, but it was there. A soft, reluctant groan that felt like it had taken effort to escape the silence. Inside, dust, the smell of old oil and wood. Tools hanging on the wall. A broken chair. And in the corner, a single bed with a faded quilt pulled tight. He was sitting on it. The old man? Eyes open, staring at the wall, like he'd been waiting. "I heard the whisper," I said. He turned toward me slowly. His face was gaunt. Skin like paper. But his eyes were bright. Alert. Terrified. "You need to leave," he said. His voice was raw, like it hadn't been used in years. It cut through the silence like a razor. My ears rang afterward. "What is this place?" I asked. He shook his head. "It's not a place. It's a condition." That didn't make sense. I opened my mouth to press him, but he raised a hand. "They don't like noise. They tolerate us, as long as we stay quiet. That's why everyone's so careful. So still. They? I asked. He looked toward the ceiling. You've already drawn attention. I can hear it. Around you. The noise inside you, your thoughts, they don't like it. I stepped back, shaken. He leaned forward, suddenly intense. Do not speak above a whisper. Do not try to record. And if they ever answer. He stopped. His throat worked like he wanted to say more, but couldn't. I asked, what happens if they answer? The old man just looked at me with eyes full of pity. And finally whispered, then it's already too late. I left the shed in a daze. The air outside felt heavier than before. Not just quiet, expectant. Like everything around me was paused mid-breath, listening to see what I would do next. The old man's words rattled in my skull on a loop. It's not a place. It's a condition. They don't like noise. If they answer, it's already too late. I didn't know what he meant. Not fully. But something about it felt true. I didn't doubt him, not after what I'd seen. Not after that whisper. I went home without making a sound. No music. No calls. I didn't even turn on a light. I just sat in my kitchen in the dark, trying to calm the pounding in my chest. Only I couldn't hear it anymore. It hit me suddenly. I hadn't heard my heartbeat in days. Or the sound of my breathing. I pressed my hand to my chest. It was there, steady, but faint. Like it was pulling back. Retreating. That night I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, watching the shadows bend and stretch as the moon shifted. Every now and then I thought I heard something, a sigh, a scrape, a whisper just beyond the range of clarity. But nothing solid. Nothing I could chase. Around 4 a.m., I got up and did something reckless. I turned on my voice recorder. I wanted proof. Evidence. Something outside of me that could confirm this wasn't just in my head. I left it running on the coffee table and walked out of the room for an hour. When I came back, I played it back. At first, it was just blank. No room tone. No ambient buzz. Just void. Then, faintly, impossibly, there it was. A voice. Not mine. Not the old man's. A low, rustling whisper that didn't form words. It sounded inside the microphone. Like the recorder wasn't recording the whisper, but being spoken through. I paused it, hands trembling. Rewound. Hit play again. Silence. No whisper. Just a clean file. Empty. Like it had never been there. Or like it didn't want to be heard twice. I should have left right then. Packed a bag and run. But I didn't. Because by then I had started to understand something terrible. I wasn't just surrounded by silence. I was changing. My thoughts had grown slower. My memories quieter. Sounds I used to know, keys jingling, coffee boiling, even my own laughter, they were fading, like photographs left in the sun. And worse. When I tried to remember my mother's voice. I couldn't. The next morning, I tested myself. I sat at the kitchen table with a pen and a legal pad and wrote down every sound I could remember. Not descriptions, the actual sounds phonetically. Dog barking. Phone ringing. The pop of a beer tap. Rain on a tin roof. My dad's laugh, low and hoarse from too many years of smoke. 30 minutes in, I hit a wall. I couldn't remember what a phone ring really sounded like. I knew the shape of it, how it should feel, but the tone, the pitch? Gone. I pressed on, jaw clenched. Wrote. The sound of chalk on a board. Then crossed it out. Because what does that sound like? My hand was shaking. Later, I tried to call someone again. My friend in the city. I dialed, pressed the phone to my ear. Nothing. No ringtone. No static. Just empty space. Like the call connected to somewhere else, or nowhere at all. I pulled the phone away. Checked the screen. The call was still going. Timer ticking. I spoke into it anyway. Are you there? My voice felt like it was falling into a black hole. No response. Just faint breathing on the other end. Not mine. Slower. Deeper. I ended the call. The silence afterward was somehow louder. That evening, I walked the neighborhood again. There was a group of children sitting on a lawn, arranged in a neat little circle, like they were playing duck duck goose. Except they weren't moving. Not laughing. Not speaking. Just sitting perfectly still, heads tilted slightly downward, hands in their laps. Watching nothing. Listening to nothing. And yet, somehow, I knew they heard everything. I didn't go near them. I kept walking and found myself in front of the old man's shed again. Only this time. The door was open. I stepped inside. The bed was empty. Quilt neatly folded at the foot. Everything else untouched. But in the dust on the floor, someone had drawn a symbol. A spiral made of tiny hash marks, etched like a sound wave collapsing into itself. At its center, a single word. Hush. No sign of him. No note. Nothing. Just that symbol burned into my mind, repeating over and over like tinnitus I couldn't unhear. That night, I had another dream. I was in my house, but every object hummed softly, my fridge, the light bulbs, even the floor. They pulsed with noise I couldn't quite make out. Until I opened my mouth to scream again. And something inside me whispered back. I started talking to myself just to feel something. Out loud. Quiet, steady monologues. Descriptions of what I was doing. I'm washing the dishes now, I'm making coffee, I'm walking to the window. I needed to prove I still had a voice. That I hadn't joined them. But every day, it got harder to hear myself. My voice didn't echo in the room. It didn't bounce. It just stopped, like it hit invisible foam and disappeared. Worse, there was a delay. Sometimes when I spoke, I'd hear my words come back a half-second later, warped and distant. Not quite mine. Like someone else repeating them from the other side of a thick wall. I stopped calling people. Emails I sent went unanswered. Texts unread. Even the news app on my phone refused to load, as if the world outside had gone offline. I was inside something now. The neighborhood had begun to shrink in strange ways. Distances felt shorter. Familiar streets looped in on themselves. I'd take a left at the community garden, and somehow end up at my own house again without remembering turning around. And the people, they watched more openly now. One afternoon, I passed a house I didn't recognize. The shades were up. Inside, a family of 4 sat perfectly still at a dinner table, not eating. Just staring straight ahead. Not at each other. Not at the food. Just forward. Their mouths were moving slightly. Barely. Repeating something silent. I didn't knock. I just kept walking. That night, I heard my own voice while I was brushing my teeth. I hadn't said anything. But from behind me, just inches from my ear, it whispered. Don't run. They hear better in motion. I spun around, mouth still full of toothpaste, toothbrush clattering to the tile. No one there. But the mirror, God. In the mirror, for a second, my reflection wasn't moving. It just stared. Unblinking. Mouth slightly open. Like it was listening to something I couldn't hear. I backed out of the bathroom and shut the door. I sat in the hallway, shivering, and tried to focus on a memory, something loud. A concert. A storm. A fight. But all I could summon was a dull, flickering image. The sound had been scrubbed clean. I knew what was coming. It wasn't just that silence had taken over the world around me. It was taking me, too. One forgotten sound at a time. I decided to research the neighborhood. Not online, that was useless now. Every search I tried returned a blank page or a vague, connection lost, error, even though my Wi-Fi was strong and steady. No history. No headlines. No name, even. Just Subdivision number 314 Delta. On the original real estate document. That sounded like a placeholder. Like something temporary that was never updated. So I went old school. I drove to the nearest town over, just far enough to feel outside the perimeter. The difference was immediate. Birds. Cars. A honking horn. A goddamn teenager yelling into his phone. I almost cried right there at a red light. I found a local library, dusty and barely staffed, but blessedly normal. I asked the desk clerk about the development next town over. Did they have any building permits, records, old zoning maps? She squinted. You mean the new one? The quiet place? That phrase, the quiet place, hit me like a punch. I nodded. She made a face, uneasy. Nobody really talks about it. People go there and don't come back. Or they do and they're different. I asked, do you know when it was built? She pulled up some county files, paper ones. Her screen was off. Technically, there's no official start date. Which is weird. Everything just shows up sometime around 1998, but there's no original zoning or land purchase. It's like it was always just there. The word she didn't say, wrong, hung in the air. She hesitated, then reached under the counter and pulled out a folder. Yellowed tabs. Handwritten notes. This is unofficial, she said, voice low. One of our volunteers used to be a surveyor. He kept notes on places that didn't make sense. Inside the folder were photos, grainy, washed-out shots of the neighborhood from the early 2000s. Same layout. Same houses. But in one picture you could see a tall fence in the distance. Barbed wire. Government style. In another, a satellite view, blurry but distinct. The shape of the neighborhood wasn't a grid. It was circular. Deliberately circular. At the center of the circle, in the oldest shots, was a large building. Maybe industrial. No windows. It was gone now. Torn down or buried. I asked her, do you know what used to be at the center? She looked at me and whispered, some kind of auditory research facility. Military contract, black budget. Shut down fast. What were they researching? I don't know. Something to do with silence. Or sound deprivation. Or maybe sound itself. The way it affects the brain. She tapped the folder once. Whatever it was, it leaked. I left, folder in hand, stomach in knots. When I crossed the invisible line back into the neighborhood, I didn't notice it at first. But by the time I pulled into my driveway, the birds were gone again. My heartbeat felt quieter. The engine ticked as it cooled, but I couldn't hear it. And when I walked to the door, I swear I heard it. Not a whisper. A click. Like something had just locked behind me. After the library visit, something in the air changed. The silence wasn't passive anymore. It was aware. Like I'd stepped over a line I wasn't supposed to cross. My ears started ringing at odd times. Not the high-pitched whine of tinnitus, but a deep, low-frequency hum, like the groan of a ship's hull under pressure. It didn't come from outside. It came from inside my head. I stopped trusting my thoughts. That night, I sat in my bedroom with the folder spread out on the floor, pages lit by a single lamp. I studied the spiral layout of the neighborhood, traced its curve with my finger. It wasn't just circular, it was concentric. A series of rings, each one smaller, tighter, drawn inward like a whirlpool. Like something was meant to be held at the center. Or something had escaped from it. One of the documents, scribbled notes, from the surveyor, mentioned acoustic null zones. Places where sound didn't just get quieter, but ceased to exist. His wording was messy, rushed. You step in and it's like your own mind pulls away from you. Like your brain stops making noise. And then this, underlined twice. They learn silence isn't absence, it's presence. It fills the gaps. It replaces what you forget. I sat there, hand shaking, staring at those words. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. I couldn't remember my own laugh. Not just the sound. The feeling. What did laughing feel like? I pressed my palms to my ears and tried to imagine it. Nothing. Just that deep, low hum rising beneath the surface like something circling. Then, from somewhere behind me, I heard my own voice. You're almost ready. I spun, heart hammering, lamp tipping and crashing beside me. No one there. No echo. Just those words hanging in the air, even though they'd already faded. And then I noticed something I should have seen long before. My reflection in the dark window across the room. It wasn't moving. Not until I did. When I stepped forward, it lagged by a breath. When I tilted my head, it didn't follow right away. And for the first time, it smiled back. But I didn't. After that night, I stopped sleeping. I didn't trust the silence that came with dreams anymore. I began hearing things again, but not the right things. Not the ones I wanted. I never heard the buzz of my phone, or my footsteps on the stairs, or the sound of my name spoken by another human being. What I heard were fragments. Murmurs in corners. Soft clicks under the floorboards. A sigh behind a door that hadn't been opened in years. And sometimes, I'd hear my own voice, repeating things I hadn't said. Not yet. At first I thought it was memory. Echoes of things I'd said aloud in the house. But the timing was off. The voice would say something just before I thought it. Just before I moved to do it. It wasn't echoing me. It was leading me. One night, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, tracing the reflection again. It still lagged. Just slightly. Just enough to catch. Then I whispered, "Who are you?" And my reflection whispered back, perfectly in sync. "You. Not me. You." That was when I understood. Something had been wearing me. Trying me on like skin. Testing my patterns. Learning how to mimic me until it could take over cleanly. And it was close. Too close. I went back to the folder. Dug through until I found a map, hand-drawn, smudged, but marked. A hidden path at the center of the development. Behind one of the retention ponds, masked by a line of decorative stones, and what looked like ornamental shrubs. A service hatch. That was where it started. Where the facility used to be. Where it still was, in whatever way that meant. I took a flashlight, a knife, and the recording from earlier, the one that had captured the whisper. I didn't know if it would still play. But it didn't matter. I wasn't going to listen to it. I was going to use it. Because something in this place responded to sound. Or rather, to its absence. To the tension around sound. I figured if I could introduce a kind of disruption, a break in the pattern, maybe I could expose it. Whatever it was. The hatch was there, just like the map said. Rusty. Half buried. Unmarked. I pried it open with the knife, and the silence that poured out wasn't natural. It was alive. Like a breath held too long by something massive. And underneath it, faint and fleeting, I heard the voice again. My voice. Singing something I'd never learned. A lullaby with no words at all. I climbed down into the dark with only the flashlight and the hum in my skull to guide me. The tunnel beneath the hatch wasn't natural. It had concrete walls, now cracked and sweating with moisture. Pipes ran overhead, some cut, others pulsing softly like veins under skin. Everything smelled stale, metallic, like breath held too long in a sealed room. But the worst part? My footsteps didn't make a sound. I watched my boots hit the ground, watched dust puff up, but I might as well have been floating. Even my breathing was soundless now, reduced to a hollow motion in my chest. About 30 feet in, I reached a door. Steel. No handle. No markings. Just a smear of something across the surface, like fingertips had tried to claw it open or shut. I touched it, and immediately felt a vibration crawl up my arm, a low thrum like a tuning fork pressed to the bone. The door opened without resistance. Inside was a wide chamber. High ceiling. Old fluorescent lights overhead, flickering but silent. And in the middle of the room, a pit. Perfectly round. About 12 feet across. I walked to the edge and looked down. There was no bottom. Only darkness, deep and thick, layered in a way that light didn't penetrate. My flashlight didn't touch it. It was like the beam was bending around it. And the sound, God, the sound. Not noise. The absence of it. It hit me all at once, this was the source. Not the neighborhood. Not the people. Not even the experiments. This pit. This core of nothing. It was eating. Sound. Memory. Identity. It consumed everything that gave shape to a person and returned only the shell. I wasn't alone in the room. They stood along the walls, figures. Human shapes, but not people. Too still. Too smooth. Eyes open, mouth slightly parted, not blinking. Silent. One of them turned to look at me. It was me. Or what was left of me. Its mouth moved. Slowly. Precisely. No sound came out. But in my head I heard it. Come home. Let go. It's quieter here. My legs trembled. I stepped back, hand fumbling in my coat for the recorder. If I was going to die, I wanted proof. I hit play. There was no sound. Then, sharp, a voice. One I hadn't recorded. You're the last noise. I should have run. Should have crushed the recorder and clawed my way back to the surface. But I didn't. Because the moment that voice said, "You're the last noise," I understood what they'd been doing all along. They weren't just removing sound. They were erasing the idea of it. Each person in that neighborhood, each quiet neighbor, each blank-eyed child, they were echoes. Remnants. People worn down, filed smooth until there was nothing left to hold on to. Not even themselves. They had given in. And I was the last holdout. The final voice in a place designed to unmake voices. I stumbled back from the pit, ears ringing now, not with sound, but with pressure. Like the absence had grown teeth. My own reflection stepped out from the shadows, no longer lagging, no longer behind. It smiled. But it wasn't imitation anymore. It had become me. All the little silences I'd surrendered, my laughter, my memories, the way my footsteps once echoed on hardwood floors, it had taken them. Shaped itself with them. And now it stood in front of me, complete. I tried to scream. Nothing came out. It stepped closer, whispering in a voice only I could hear. "You're not needed anymore. Not here. We'll keep your shape. You can rest." I fell to my knees at the edge of the pit, staring down into that perfect void. And for a moment, I understood it. Not as a place, but a being. A presence that didn't feed on flesh or blood. Just volume. I reached into my pocket and turned the recorder back on. Whispered one word. "No." Then I threw it into the pit. The reaction was immediate. The silence screamed. Not in sound, but in force. A rippling wave of pressure that threw my double across the room and sent dust raining from the ceiling. Light stuttered, flickered. For the first time, I heard something raw and awful. The silence dying. I ran. Up the tunnel. Out the hatch. Through the neighborhood. Windows shattered as I passed. People stepped out of their homes, clutching their heads, mouthing silent screams. Some fell. Some stood rigid. All of them unraveling, their forms flickering, like their outlines couldn't hold anymore. The houses collapsed without noise. The streets buckled without sound. But I heard it. The rush of wind. The thud of my feet. The pulse in my ears. I kept running until I crossed the invisible border, into the next town, where sound lived. Where cars honked and birds called and people shouted. I collapsed at a gas station, sobbing into the pavement. The clerk came out, yelling something I couldn't process. But I heard him. God help me, I heard him. That was 6 months ago. The development's gone now. Wiped off maps. Disavowed by every agency I tried to contact. I've tried to move on. But some nights, when the wind dies, when the world gets just a little too quiet, I swear I can feel it again. That hum. That hunger. Waiting. For the next voice to forget itself. For the next sound to fall still. Because silence isn't empty. It's alive. And once it knows your name, it never stops listening.